Imagine sacrificing everything for your family, paying tuition, offering your home, putting your own dreams on hold, and then one day, your own sister accuses you of stealing. After everything I did for her, after all the support I gave, how could she betray me like this? What do you do when the people you love turn on you, and you're left holding the weight of their lies? Well, I'm about to tell you how I turned their perfect little lie into chaos, because when you're pushed to the edge, you either fight back or break. Before we dive deeper into this crazy family betrayal, if you've ever felt abandoned, misjudged, or betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button. I want to know how you've dealt with situations like this. And don't forget to subscribe, because the drama, the revenge, and the real consequences are just getting started. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. I've always prided myself on being the responsible one in the family. It wasn't about being perfect, far from it, but I always took pride in looking after things, making sure everyone was okay. I'm 27 now, and when I look back at the last decade, I can see the sacrifices, the quiet struggles, and the moments where I just pushed through, because that's what family does, right? They don't need to ask, you just step in. And that's exactly what I did for Jenna. Jenna was 19 when I agreed to help her with college. And I'll be honest, I never expected it to turn into a nightmare. To anyone on the outside, it seemed simple. She needed help with tuition, and I was in a place where I could give it. So I did. What's family for if not to help each other? But the truth is, it wasn't just about the money. Jenna was my sister. The whole half-sister thing never mattered to me. We grew up together, and despite having different dads, we always had this bond. I was the one who taught her to drive. I was there for her when she went through her first breakup, and I even drove her to grief counseling appointments after her dad passed away. When she was shattered by that loss, I was the one she came to. I was there through the tears, the rage, and the long nights where we'd both just sit in silence, not knowing what to say. She was family, and I loved her. It felt like that bond could never be broken. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. When Jenna moved in with me, everything changed. At first, it felt like a fresh start. She'd just been accepted into college, and I was excited for her. The idea was simple. I'd help her out financially while she worked part-time to pay for her personal expenses. I'd even offered for her to live with me rent-free. Since the school was close to my apartment, I thought it'd be a great arrangement. We'd get to hang out. Maybe even do some of the things we used to do when we were kids. I was wrong. It didn't take long before things started to feel off. Jenna started hanging out with a new group of friends, and the more I watched them, the more uneasy I felt. They were loud, reckless, and just didn't seem like the kind of people I wanted around. I didn't want to seem controlling, but they would come over at all hours, make a mess, and act like they owned the place. I tried to ignore it at first. She was 19. Maybe I was being too uptight, but the more I saw them, the more I knew something wasn't right. One time, I caught one of them rummaging through my kitchen cabinets. I didn't say anything at first, but it didn't sit right with me. A few weeks into this new living arrangement, I tried to talk to her. Jenna, I'm not comfortable with your friends hanging around all the time. They seem suspicious. Honestly, they're a bit much. She shot me a look that stopped me in my tracks. It's none of your business who I hang out with. I didn't argue. I couldn't. Instead, I just let it slide. But deep down, a feeling of dread started to settle in my stomach. Something about them felt dangerous. As if things weren't already off kilter. Jenna wasn't pulling her weight. We'd agreed that she would work part-time, but she wasn't even looking for a job. Meanwhile, I was working long hours, sacrificing my weekends just to keep my finances on track. I wasn't asking for much, but it was starting to feel like I was doing everything while she just coasted along. I'd already cut back on my own life to help her, but now I was feeling taken for granted. I wanted to talk to her about it, but I knew it would just start a fight, so I kept quiet. Then, something happened that was supposed to be a victory. After months of saving, I finally bought a car. It wasn't much a used sedan, nothing fancy, but it was reliable. And it was mine. For me, it was a huge accomplishment. I wanted to share that moment with Jenna, to have her celebrate it with me. I called Mom to tell her the news, and I was practically glowing as I spoke. "Mom, I finally got the car. I just need a little more cash to finish paying it off, but it's almost done." Mom was thrilled for me. "That's amazing. Sweetheart, you've worked so hard, I'm proud of you." Jenna, however, didn't say a word. She just kept scrolling on her phone, her face blank. I didn't think much of it at the time, it was just her being her, right? But deep down, I could feel the distance growing between us. I thought maybe I was overthinking things, but the tension was real. Things only got worse after that. The mood between us was cold. Jenna didn't congratulate me, didn't even seem to care. She was barely speaking to me unless she absolutely had to. And even then, her tone was clipped and defensive. She started leaving her things all over the apartment, forgetting to clean up after herself, and cranking the TV volume up when I was trying to work. I had tried to let it slide, but every little thing started to feel like a small slap in the face. I was starting to feel like I wasn't her sister anymore. I was just a free place to stay, a convenient option for her to use. But it wasn't just that. I kept telling myself that she was going through something, and maybe I was overreacting, but the whispers were starting to grow louder. I thought things were already strained between us, but what happened next was something I couldn't ignore. One morning, we had planned a trip to the lake. Nothing fancy. I thought it'd be a way for us to reconnect, to get back to the way things used to be. I was hoping, at least, Jenna seemed excited at first, which was rare, and I thought maybe this would reset things. But that morning, when we were packing the car, everything changed. I was gathering snacks and blankets while she grabbed her stuff. That's when I heard her scream from her room. It wasn't a normal scream. This was panic. I dropped everything and rushed to her side. "What's going on?" I asked, confused and worried. She was standing in the middle of her room, tearing through her things like a madwoman. Clothes were flying, drawers wide open. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "My dad's camera," she said, her voice shaking. "It's gone." I froze for a moment, unsure of what she meant. This wasn't just any camera, it was a vintage, gold-plated Alex Luxus that was worth thousands, passed down from her dad's side of the family. I knew how much it meant to her, how she'd told me about it before, how her dad used to take pictures with it when she was little. It was one of the few things she had left of him. I helped her search, frantically pulling apart her room, then the living room, then the car, but it was gone, vanished. I asked her, "Are you sure you brought it with you when you moved in?" She froze for a second, like she was considering the possibility, but then shook her head. "I had it. I used it just the other day." I suggested we retrace her steps, see if maybe she left it at a friend's house or in one of their cars, but when I said that, her demeanor shifted completely. She crossed her arms, giving me a look that was both frustrated and accusatory. "I didn't leave it anywhere," she said slowly, her tone dark. "Someone must have taken it." I blinked, shocked. "Wait, what?" And that's when she did it. She accused me of stealing it. The words hit me like a slap. "Are you seriously accusing me of stealing your camera?" I asked, my voice rising. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's weird," she said. "How you suddenly have money for a car and now my camera's missing. Don't you think that's convenient?" I couldn't breathe for a second. I was stunned. I'd done everything for her. I'd sacrificed my own life, my savings, my future, and this was how she saw me, as a thief. My voice trembled with disbelief. "Are you kidding me right now? I've been saving for months for that car. You've seen me working extra hours. You know how hard I've worked, and now you're accusing me of pawning your dad's camera to cover the rest." She shrugged, like it didn't even matter. "I don't know. It's just suspicious timing." Suspicious timing. That word suspicious felt like a knife twisting in my gut. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the camera. This was about trust. The trust I'd given her. The sacrifices I'd made. And now, she thought I was the enemy. She thought I was the one who betrayed her. And at that moment, I realized things would never be the same between us again. That moment in the living room, Jenna accusing me of stealing her father's camera, felt like a slap to the face, but I didn't even have time to process it fully before things started spiraling even further. After she threw her accusation, I stood there, frozen, trying to wrap my mind around what was happening. I had never felt so utterly blindsided in my life. My hands were shaking, not because I was scared, but because I was angry. Angry that after everything I'd done for her, she could think I was capable of something so vile. I had spent months working extra shifts to help pay for her tuition, to give her the opportunity to focus on school without financial worries, and this is how she repays me, by turning on me like I was the enemy. I should have said something in that moment. I should have screamed at her, told her how messed up she was for even implying that I could steal from her. But I didn't. I couldn't. All I could do was walk out of the room, grab my car keys, and get the hell out of the apartment. I needed space to breathe, to calm down, to figure out how in the world this was happening. I thought, maybe, just maybe, she'd come to her senses. She'd realize how wrong she was, and we could fix it. I couldn't imagine a world where we couldn't fix it. I was wrong. The drive to the lake was awkward. I didn't know what to say to her anymore. Jenna was still sulking in the passenger seat, staring out the window with that same defiant look. Every time I glanced over at her, I saw the walls she'd built up between us, walls I didn't even know had existed until now. I wanted to ask her why she'd accused me, why she felt like she could just destroy our relationship like that, but I didn't. I just kept driving, hoping that the quiet time away would give us both the chance to think things through. But when we got to the lake, things didn't get better. They got worse. We spent the day sitting by the water, Jenna barely speaking to me. As usual, she was still cold, still distant, like she was daring me to say something wrong. I tried to ask her about how things were going in school, how she was feeling, but she just shrugged, barely acknowledging me. It was like I was talking to a stranger, not the sister I had spent my life protecting. That night, when we got back to the apartment, everything felt off. The air was thick with unspoken words, with resentment that had been festering for days. Jenna went straight to her room without a word. I sat in the living room for a long time, just staring at the walls, wondering how things had come to this. The next day, more of my things went missing. At first, it was small, just a few things here and there, my favorite coffee mug, a charger, reusable bags. I thought I had misplaced them, that I was just being forgetful. But then I started finding my things in places they didn't belong. My charger plugged into her phone, my coffee mug, sitting on her nightstand, half full of some mystery drink. I confronted her, of course, but all she did was shrug, like it didn't matter. "I didn't think you'd mind," she said nonchalantly. Of course, I minded. It wasn't about the items themselves, it was about the disrespect. It was about how she didn't even seem to care enough to acknowledge it. I started to get angry, but I pushed it down. I didn't want to fight over something so small, or at least, that's what I told myself. But then the little things started to escalate. My plants that I had been carefully nurturing for months started to die. Not just from neglect, no, they were overwatered, drowned. I couldn't prove it, but I knew something wasn't right. I was done letting it slide. This wasn't just her being a messy teenager anymore. This was deliberate. The house was becoming a battlefield, and I was the one who was being destroyed. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to reach her anymore. So I confronted her, fully expecting more deflection, more blame shifting, and I got it. She didn't even seem sorry. She just stood there with that same cold expression, arms crossed. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, almost bored. "They're just things." Just things. I stared at her in disbelief. "This is my apartment. Jenna, I'm the one paying rent. You're living here for free, and this is how you repay me. By disrespecting everything I've done for you. Maybe you shouldn't have invited me to live here if you didn't want to deal with my life," she shot back, a smirk creeping onto her face. That sentence, those words, they hit me harder than I cared to admit. She thought this was a burden. She thought I was doing all of this out of some obligation. Not love. It wasn't about helping her anymore. It was about how she could manipulate me into doing things for her. But I wasn't done yet. I couldn't keep swallowing the bitterness. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. This wasn't just about dirty dishes or broken plants anymore. This was about control, about a sister who was taking and never once considering how much I was giving. And then the real disaster happened. The camera, the thing that had started this whole mess, it didn't just disappear. It was still in the house. In fact, it was at Mom's house. It had never even made it to my apartment in the first place. Mom called me one day, clearly feeling guilty about the whole mess. "I found it," she said, sounding both relieved and remorseful. It was in the guest room, buried under some old stuff. Relief. I felt it for a second, but then it hit me. It didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. The lie had been cast, and the gossip had spread. Jenna's dad's family was furious. Of course, they didn't bother to ask me for my side. No, I was the villain, the thief. It didn't matter that I had never taken anything. They had already made up their minds, and that's when the whispers started. At first, it was just a few. People at work would glance at me differently, like they knew something I didn't. Then it was the neighbors, who started avoiding me in the hallways. I even caught a few people whispering behind my back at the grocery store. And that's when I realized I was being suffocated by lies. And there was nothing I could do to make it stop. It was the constant little things that finally pushed me over the edge. The passive-aggressive comments, the blatant disrespect, the way Jenna seemed to think she could just walk all over me. I had spent months sacrificing, quietly putting my own life on hold to help her. And yet, she acted like I owed her something, like everything I did for her was just a given. I remember one night, I was sitting in the living room, trying to unwind after a long day at work. I had just finished a report for a project I was working on and decided to relax for a bit. The silence in the apartment felt heavier than usual. There was no music, no chatter, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the street outside. Jenna was in her room, as usual, doing God knows what. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the way she treated me, it was the way she treated everything around her. I had begun to notice how careless she was with her things and, more importantly, how careless she was with mine. I caught her once, walking through the living room with a bottle of my shampoo in her hand. "Jenna," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, "why are you using my shampoo?" She didn't even look at me, just shrugged and tossed the bottle back on the counter. "It's not like you'll miss it." I froze. I should have said something, anything, but for some reason I didn't. I stood there staring at her and then walked away, letting it slide, again and again. But I knew deep down, I was letting her push me further and further into a corner. Then came the moment that broke me. One afternoon, I came home early from work. I had planned to treat myself to a quick nap before diving into some paperwork. When I walked into the living room, I saw Jenna's friends again hanging out on the couch. They didn't look up when I walked in, didn't acknowledge me. Instead, they were laughing, passing a bottle of liquor around like they owned the place. They were disrespecting everything: my space, my time, my life. I had told Jenna 100 times to keep the noise down when I was working. I had begged her to ask her friends to stop coming over uninvited, but nothing changed. They treated my apartment like a free-for-all. They used my kitchen, my bathroom, my living room. They took what they wanted, and I was left with the mess. "Jenna," I said, my voice steady but laced with frustration, "I've asked you 1,000,000 times to keep it down when I'm working, and you're letting them trash the place." She didn't flinch, didn't even respond. Her friends just kept laughing, oblivious to me, like I wasn't even there. I walked over to the window, trying to steady my breathing, to remind myself that I could keep my cool, but it felt impossible. My blood was boiling. How could she not see how unfair this was? How could she not understand the stress this was causing me? Every day felt like a battle, and every day, she won. As the days went by, I began to notice more and more things going missing from the apartment. Random items, chargers, books, coffee mugs, even a few of my plants. I thought I had misplaced them at first, But then I saw them in her room. I even found one of my scarves on the floor, trampled beneath the chaos of her things. One day, I went into her room to retrieve my scarf. I picked it up, and as I turned to leave, my eyes fell on a pile of receipts from places I didn't recognize, from stores I hadn't been to. That's when it hit me. Jenna was using my things and my money for her own gain. I had given her a roof over her head, tuition money, and endless support, and this was how she repaid me, by turning my life into her personal playground, by pretending like none of it mattered. I felt the anger rising in me again. I stood in her room, staring at the pile of receipts, the proof of her betrayal. I felt so damn stupid for not seeing it sooner. The lies, the thefts, the way she had turned me into a fool. How had I let it go on for so long? But there was one thing I hadn't seen yet, one thing that would completely break the illusion. The camera. It had been weeks since I'd last heard about it, the camera that Jenna had accused me of stealing. The thing that had started this entire mess. She hadn't mentioned it since that day in the living room, but I knew it still haunted her. I thought I was the one who was broken by that accusation, but she was, too. I wasn't sure if she realized it yet, but the truth was about to come out. It wasn't about the camera. It wasn't about the things that went missing. It was about the fact that Jenna had spent so much time making me feel like the bad guy, that I was starting to believe her narrative. I couldn't let that happen. Not anymore. I decided to confront her again. No more walking away. No more passive-aggressive silence. I had to make her face the consequences of her actions, even if she couldn't handle them. This time, it wasn't about proving my innocence. It was about showing her that I would no longer let her destroy me. When I walked into her room, she was on her bed, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I entered. "We need to talk," I said firmly. She looked at me, eyebrows raised. "About what?" "About everything," I replied, taking a deep breath. "About the camera, about my things disappearing, about you treating me like your personal servant. I've had enough." Her face shifted just for a second, but it was enough for me to see the shift in her. It was like a crack in her armor. "I don't know what you're talking about," she muttered, her voice laced with that same defensive tone. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I shot back. "The camera. The way you've been lying about me, accusing me of things I didn't do, the way you've been taking from me, using me, and then turning it all around on me like I'm the villain. I'm done." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. Jenna, I've been there for you. I've done everything for you. And this is how you repay me. I'm done." For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth hanging open, as if she couldn't process what I was saying. Then, the anger returned. She stood up, pacing back and forth in her room, her fists clenched at her sides. "You think I'm the problem? Don't you?" she snapped, her voice full of rage. "You think I'm the one who ruined everything. You're so full of yourself you can't even see it. You're the one who's been ruining everything, making me feel small, making me feel like I'm nothing." My head was spinning. She was twisting everything, but I couldn't let her. Not anymore. "You've been using me. Jenna, you've been taking advantage of everything I've given you, and now you want to make me the bad guy. Not happening. You need to take responsibility for your actions." She stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping, and for a moment, I thought she might break down. But then she looked at me, her eyes cold. "Maybe you should just leave. Maybe I'm better off without you." And that was it, the final straw. I had done everything for her, and now she was telling me to leave. She wanted me to walk away so she could keep playing the victim. Not this time. Without another word, I turned and walked out. This was no longer just about a camera, about a stolen object. It was about respect, about boundaries, about the last shred of trust I had in her. But the worst was yet to come. It was the night that everything changed. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the kind of tension that builds up over time, slowly, until you can no longer hold it in. I had tried for weeks to remain calm, to convince myself that things would get better, that Jenna would come to her senses. But every day it was something new, some little betrayal, some moment that chipped away at the person I had been before all this started. I had walked out of her room after that conversation, but I couldn't just walk away from this. Not anymore. I had let her push me around for far too long, and now I was ready to do something about it. I spent the next few hours in my room, pacing back and forth, trying to calm myself, but no matter how hard I tried, I kept hearing her voice in my head, the same defensive tone, the same excuses. She wanted to turn everything around on me, to make me feel like I was the one at fault. It wasn't just about the camera anymore. It wasn't about her messy friends or her missing things. It was about the lie she'd created, the lie that had been spread to everyone in our lives, the way she had turned me into the villain, and the world had just accepted it without asking any questions. My heart raced as the thought of confronting her again ran through my mind. I had to do this. There was no turning back now. I grabbed my keys and walked toward the front door. The apartment felt empty, silent. I could hear the faint sound of music coming from Jenna's room. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I marched down the hallway, knocked sharply on her door, and threw it open without waiting for her to answer. "Jenna, we're going to settle this now." She looked up from her phone, surprised, but there was no sign of guilt, no apology in her eyes, just that same cold indifference that had become so familiar. Her friends were gone, but she still sat there as if she owned the place, acting like nothing was wrong. I could feel my anger bubbling beneath the surface. "What's this about now?" she asked, her voice lazy, like she couldn't care less. "Everything," I said, stepping into the room and shutting the door behind me. "About the lies, about the accusations, about you disrespecting me in my own home, about you making my life a living hell." Her eyes flickered with something that might have been annoyance or maybe just boredom, but I wasn't letting her dismiss me this time. "I've had enough. Jenna, I've sacrificed my life, my money, my energy, and my time for you, and this is how you repay me. By lying, by accusing me of something I didn't do, I'm done." She didn't respond. Instead, she just folded her arms and leaned back, like she was waiting for me to finish. The silence between us was thick, suffocating, and I knew what I had to say next would shatter whatever was left of our relationship. "I'm not your backup anymore. I'm not your punching bag," I said, my voice louder this time. "I've done everything for you, and all you've done is take. I gave you a place to stay. I paid for your tuition. I let you live here without paying a single cent. And you think I owe you more? No. I'm not doing this anymore. This is where it ends." Her face twisted slightly, as if she couldn't understand what I was saying. "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about dramatic? How about accusing me of stealing from you? How about turning the whole town against me? How about making me feel like I'm the one who's messed up when I've been the one holding everything together?" She didn't look at me. Instead, her eyes moved to the floor, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd finally broken through. Maybe she would see how much I had given, how much I had sacrificed for her. But then, she shrugged. "Like it didn't matter. I don't see what the big deal is." The frustration in me erupted. "The big deal is you ruined everything. Jenna, you ruined this family. You ruined me." I stepped closer, my chest tight with anger, but also a strange sense of finality. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to make it come to this, but I had to. "I've had enough. I can't keep enabling you. You're not a kid anymore. You're an adult, and if you don't start acting like one, you're going to lose everything." She just stared at me. I could see her jaw tighten, her fists clenching at her sides, but instead of backing down, I kept going. "You don't get to keep manipulating me. You don't get to keep destroying everything I've worked for. I've given you every chance to make this right. I've bent over backwards for you, and this is how you repay me." I could see the emotions shifting in her eyes. First, there was anger, then confusion, but underneath it all, I saw something else: fear. Fear that I was serious. Fear that I wasn't going to be there to pick up the pieces anymore. "I'm done," I said again, my voice steady this time, final. "You need to pack your stuff and leave." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the sound of my pulse ringing in my ears. Jenna's expression twisted, shocked, hurt, and yet still defiant. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but the words never came. Instead, she just stared at me, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what I was saying. "You're kicking me out," her voice cracked, but it was more disbelief than sorrow. "I'm not kicking you out, Jenna," I replied, my voice cold now. "I'm letting you make your own choices, and if that means you have to go, then you need to go." Her face flushed with anger, her eyes narrowing. "Fine," she spat, standing up. "I don't need you anyway." And with that, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I could hear her packing in the next room, throwing things into a bag with a force that made the apartment tremble. I stood there, frozen for a moment, the weight of the situation finally settling on me. I was done. I didn't hear her leave. I didn't hear her say goodbye. She just packed up her things and disappeared. But what happened next, what she did, shocked me to my core. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the apartment, and for a moment, I stood there, trying to process what had just happened. The room was eerily silent. Save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside, I hadn't expected it to feel like this empty, like a part of me had been ripped out. But the more I stood there, the more I realized that I wasn't feeling sadness. I wasn't feeling guilt or regret. I was feeling relief. I had let her walk all over me for so long. I had allowed her to manipulate me, to turn me into a villain in my own life. I had given everything to her, and she had taken it without a second thought. And now, finally, I had drawn a line. I had taken back control. But as the silence settled, the weight of what I had done began to sink in. I had kicked my sister out. I had told her to leave, to pack her things and go. I didn't know if I had done the right thing, but I couldn't keep questioning myself. The damage was already done, and I had to live with the consequences. The days that followed felt like a blur. Jenna's things were gone. The apartment felt oddly quieter without her. No more random noises, no more late-night conversations. At first, I thought I'd feel guilty for making her leave. I thought I'd second-guess my decision, wondering if I had been too harsh, too quick to cast her aside. But every time I thought about it, I remembered the way she had treated me, the way she had accused me of theft, the way she had thrown our entire relationship into the gutter. I couldn't forgive her for that. Not yet. It was when I went to work the next day that the ripple effect started. I had managed to keep my head down, tried to stay focused on my tasks, but the whispers were already starting. My boss, a kind woman named Linda, pulled me aside during lunch. "Are you okay, dear?" she asked, her tone soft, almost too sympathetic. "I heard some rumors, and I just wanted to check in on you." Rumors. I hadn't realized how fast the word had spread. The gossip mill had already started, churning out stories of my falling out with Jenna. It wasn't just at work, at the grocery store. I could feel eyes on me, people looking at me with pity, with judgment. It was like I had become the subject of some sordid reality show, and everyone around me had a front row seat to the drama. "I'm fine, Linda," I said, forcing a smile. "Just family stuff, you know how it is." She didn't press further, but the look on her face said everything. She knew. Everyone knew. I could see it in their eyes, the way they looked at me like I was a different person now. I didn't care, though I couldn't. I had to keep moving forward. I had to focus on what was next. At home, things were just as tense. I didn't hear from Jenna for days. There were no apologies, no attempts to reach out or explain herself. She just disappeared. It hurt, but it didn't surprise me. I had known for a while that she was incapable of taking responsibility for her actions. If she couldn't even acknowledge the damage she had caused, then I didn't owe her any explanation. But the worst part wasn't the silence from Jenna. It was the realization that my own mother wasn't calling, either. Mom had always been the mediator in our family, the one who smoothed things over when the storms hit, but this time, she was silent. It felt like she had chosen her side and it wasn't mine. A week passed before she finally called me. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge of exhaustion in it. "We need to talk," she said. "Jenna's been through a lot. She's really struggling, and I think you need to hear her out." I didn't even hesitate. I've heard her out, Mom, for years. I've done nothing but bend over backward for her. She's the one who turned her back on me, not the other way around. Mom sighed. "I know, honey, I know, but she's your sister. You can't just throw her away." That was the moment it hit me. She wasn't on my side. Not fully. She was still playing the role of the peacemaker, still trying to smooth things over, even though Jenna was the one who had caused all of this, even though I had been the one who had been wronged. But I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into feeling responsible. Not anymore. "I'm done. Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I've given her every chance to make things right. I've let her walk all over me. Let her accuse me of things I didn't do. Let her destroy everything. I'm not doing it anymore. If she wants to talk, she can come to me, but I'm not chasing after her." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I could almost hear her thinking, processing everything I had just said. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice defeated. "I just want you to know. I love you, both of you." "I know," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had finally said what I needed to say. I had finally taken control. The next few days were filled with more whispers, more judgment from people who didn't know the full story, but I didn't care. I had done what was right for me. And slowly, things started to get back to normal. I focused on my work, my plans for the future. I started saving for my postgrad studies again, something I had put on hold for so long to help Jenna. The strain from the constant drama was gone, and I could feel a lightness in the air, a freedom I hadn't realized I'd lost. And then something unexpected happened. It was a month after Jenna left, and I was in the grocery store, picking up a few things for the week. I hadn't seen her or heard from her since the day she left, and truth be told, I hadn't expected to, but as I walked down the aisle, I saw her. She was standing by the produce section, her face gaunt, her eyes tired. She looked different, smaller, worn down. I almost didn't recognize her at first. For a moment, I stood frozen, watching her. She didn't see me, and as I watched her, I realized something. The person standing in front of me was not the Jenna I once knew. She was broken by her own choices, by the path she had chosen. I thought about walking over to her, about trying to fix things, to be the sister she had once had, but I didn't. I didn't go up to her. I didn't say a word. Instead, I walked past her, kept my head straight, and moved forward. The world had shifted, and so had I. Story 2. My name is Karen Maddox. I'm 36 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. I always thought I had a stable life, an unshakable marriage, a loving daughter, and everything in between. But the truth is, I was living in a bubble, one that popped without warning one Sunday afternoon. It all started with Laurel, my sister-in-law. She barged into my house, dragging her son Noah behind her. The door slammed against the wall with a loud bang, and for a moment, I thought I had imagined the sound. But no. There she stood, her face flushed with panic and fury. Before I could process what was happening, she pointed a trembling finger at me and screamed, "You hit my son!" I froze. Hit her son? I hadn't even spoken to him today, let alone touched him. But before I could protest, Laurel shoved Noah forward like he was a shield and demanded, "Tell her what happened." Noah, 7 years old, stood there staring at the floor, his body language screaming guilt, his voice barely above a whisper. He mumbled, "She slapped me." My stomach dropped. I hadn't even looked in his direction, much less laid a hand on him, but that didn't seem to matter. The world was already turning against me. And then Jared walked in. Jared, my husband of almost 10 years, looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. "You've always had a temper," he said, like it was some kind of confession, a known fact. His voice was flat, emotionless, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to scream the truth that I'd never touched Noah, never raised a hand in anger, but my words got caught. He didn't even seem to hear me. His mind was already made up. "You've always had a temper," he repeated, as if it explained everything. No questions, no searching for the truth, just accusation. I didn't know then, but I knew now it wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was an attack, a calculated, coordinated one, and I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal went. Before all this, life felt steady. Jared and I had our routines. Our daughter Maisie, at 6, was an endless ball of energy. She loved making sidewalk chalk murals in our driveway dragons, castles, galaxies. It was the little things like that which made our house feel like home. We weren't rich. Our house was modest, a brick home with white shutters that creaked when you opened the door, and a swing on the porch that Jared never got around to fixing. We had a rhythm. I cooked. Jared mowed the lawn. We had our issues, sure, but nothing that seemed too big to handle. That is, until Laurel came into the picture. Laurel had just gone through another messy divorce. No one was surprised, but she showed up at our doorstep one day, suitcase in hand, asking if she could stay with us for a while. "Just until I get back on my feet," she'd said, flashing her best sad sister face. Jared agreed. Of course, he always did. And so, Laurel moved in, bringing her son Noah with her. Now, Noah wasn't a bad kid, but he was unpredictable. His energy was like a force of nature, loud, messy, and uncontrollable. I tried to be patient. Really, I did. But Noah had a way of tearing through the house like a tornado, and his mom Laurel loved the chaos. She thrived in it. She played the victim at every turn, painting herself as the fragile one who couldn't catch a break. Jared and his mother bought into it. Every single time, they would talk about Laurel like she was some fragile bird that needed to be protected. But I saw something else, something that told me Laurel was never truly the victim. She was just someone who knew how to manipulate, to control. Still, I played nice. I wiped up the juice Noah spilled. I cleaned up after him when he took to the living room like a wild animal. I convinced myself it was temporary. That soon enough, Laurel would get back on her feet and leave. But I didn't know it at the time. Laurel was laying a trap. It was a Sunday afternoon, just like any other. Maisie was in her room, drawing a dragon with rainbow wings. I was in the kitchen, slicing apples and cantaloupe for her snack. Humming to myself, life felt normal, routine, simple. And then the back door slammed open. Laurel stood there, out of breath, clutching Noah by the wrist. His face was red, not swollen, just red, like he had been crying on command. My heart stopped. "You hit my son!" Laurel shouted. I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I had been in the kitchen the entire time. She shoved Noah toward me, pushing him forward as if he were a shield, and ordered, "Tell her." Noah, his eyes on the floor, mumbled again. "She slapped me." My mind raced. Slapped him? I hadn't even spoken to the boy today. Before I could react, Jared appeared in the doorway. He glanced at me, his eyes cold. "What's going on?" he asked, but there was no concern in his voice, just an edge of suspicion. Laurel whipped around. "Ask your wife, she's the one who hit him." Jared didn't hesitate. He crossed his arms and, without missing a beat, said, "You've always had a temper. Did you lose it this time?" My heart sank. This wasn't just about a mistake. This wasn't even about Noah. This was about something deeper, something I hadn't yet seen. And Jared, he didn't question, didn't ask for an explanation. He just believed her. The man I had spent nearly a decade with, who had seen me at my best and worst, had chosen his sister's word over mine. No questions, no doubt. That moment, that was when I realized how deep the betrayal ran. But I was about to find out just how far it would go. The worst part wasn't Laurel's accusation. It wasn't even the way Jared looked at me. His eyes filled with disappointment like I'd betrayed him. No, the worst part was realizing that in that moment, when my own husband didn't stand by me, I had been living a lie. The life I thought we'd built was just a fragile illusion, easily shattered by a single word from Laurel. And now it was my turn to face the fallout. After Laurel's outburst, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. I couldn't find my footing. I was still trying to wrap my head around what had just happened, trying to process the words. The look on Jared's face, the absolute certainty that he believed his sister over me. No one even asked me what happened. There was no defense, there was only blame. And the worst part, I could feel it. He wasn't just disappointed, he was scared. Scared of what? Of the chaos Laurel had created, or scared of the truth? I stood there, in the middle of my own kitchen, feeling like an intruder in my own life. I should have said something. I should have fought harder, but I didn't, because I knew deep down, I knew that any defense I offered would fall on deaf ears. Karen, Jared said, his voice low, almost like he was talking to someone he barely knew. We're going to need to figure this out. For Maisie's sake. For Maisie's sake. What about for mine? What about the fact that my entire world had just been turned upside down, and no one was even willing to hear my side? But I didn't say anything. Instead, I just nodded, numbly. I looked at Noah, standing there, not meeting my eyes. And for the first time, I saw him for what he was, a pawn in Laurel's twisted game, but I wasn't ready to fight just yet. No, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I needed time to breathe, to think. Later that evening, when the house had fallen silent, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the half-eaten plate of food I had prepared for Maisie. Jared had barely said a word to me after the scene. He was in the living room, scrolling through his phone, probably talking to his mother and sister about how to handle the situation. But I wasn't handling it. I wasn't sure I even wanted to. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the way Jared had looked at me like I was a stranger, the words he had said, his accusation that I always had a temper. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that, but it was the first time it hit me like a slap across the face. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the one who was out of control. Laurel and Noah had been living in our home for months, and I had tolerated it. I had been patient, understanding, but what had I gotten in return? A public accusation, a betrayal from the one person I thought would always have my back. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live in a house that felt more like a courtroom than a home. The next day, the storm began to gather. It wasn't just the cold shoulder from Jared that stung. It wasn't just the silent treatment or the tension that crackled in the air like static. It was the weight of knowing that this wasn't going to end with a simple apology. No, this was bigger. I was sitting in the living room, going over some old receipts. When the doorbell rang, my heart stopped in my chest. I knew exactly who it was before I even opened the door. A woman in a charcoal gray blazer stood on the other side, holding a binder. Her eyes were sympathetic, but the professional tone in her voice cut through me like a knife. "Mrs. Maddox," she asked, "I'm Detective Liza Haynes. I'm with Child Protective Services. We've received a report alleging that you may have physically harmed your nephew. I need to ask you a few questions and also check in on your daughter, if she's home." My mind raced. This was a nightmare. I hadn't done anything. But as the words spilled out of my mouth, I didn't do anything. I swear I felt the walls closing in. It didn't matter what I said. The damage had already been done. Maisie was upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing downstairs. I led Detective Haynes inside, my heart pounding as she scanned the room, taking it all in like some kind of investigator in a crime scene. I tried to keep my cool. I tried to explain what had happened, to give context, but the words felt like they were slipping through my fingers. The worst part, I could see the doubt in her eyes. It wasn't just the accusations. It was the way everyone had already made up their minds. The way they'd already decided I was guilty. I could feel it just beneath the surface. Hidden in every glance and every word, they didn't care about the truth. They cared about protecting the lie. That night, after Detective Haynes left, I sat in the darkened living room, my mind spinning. I didn't know what was worse, the feeling of helplessness or the realization that I was utterly alone. My husband had chosen his sister. My family had already judged me, and Maisie was the only one who believed me. But how long could I rely on her? A 6-year-old who didn't even understand the full scope of what was happening. I had to fight for her. I had to fight for myself. It was then that I remembered the cameras. 2 years ago, Jared had installed a motion-activated camera in the backyard. He'd said it was so we could keep an eye on Maisie when she played outside. But now, in this moment of desperation, I realized that camera might be my lifeline. I rushed upstairs to grab my laptop. My hands were shaking as I typed in the password. Liza had left earlier with no answers, no sense of resolution. She had just promised to look into it. As the video footage loaded, my breath caught in my throat. The grainy footage was enough to show what I needed to see. There was Noah, alone in the living room. He spilled juice everywhere, and then Laurel appeared, crouching beside him. She whispered something to him, something I couldn't make out. But then, she slapped him, hard, right across the face, and then, just as calmly as you please, she turned to look directly into the camera. She smiled. Not a look of surprise, not a sheepish grin. She smiled like she had planned it all along. And then I saw it. She knew the camera was there. The next few moments were a blur. My mind raced as I clicked through the footage, my chest tightening with each passing second. The lies, the manipulation, the conspiracy, it was all laid out in front of me, clear as day. I had proof, real proof. But the worst part, it wasn't just that Laurel had lied, it was that Jared had been complicit. I couldn't breathe as I saw Jared walk into the frame, talking to Laurel. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The moment I saw her turn and say, "Don't worry, I'll handle it, she'll be gone by tomorrow," my world crumbled. I couldn't believe it. My husband, the man I trusted, the father of my daughter, he was in on it. The next day, everything changed. The morning after I found the footage, I couldn't bring myself to leave Maisie's room. She was still asleep, wrapped in the safety of her blanket, unaware of the storm that had descended upon our lives. I watched her sleep, her little chest rising and falling, and all I could think was, how did I get here? The answer hit me like a wave. I had been complacent for too long. I had stood by while my family, my so-called support system, crumbled under the weight of their own selfishness and manipulation. I'd always put Maisie first, of course, but in the process, I'd allowed everyone around me to take advantage of that, to take advantage of me, but no more. The truth was, I wasn't just dealing with a betrayal. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding with Laurel or a slip-up with Jared. No, this was about something deeper, something darker. They had conspired against me, they had set me up, and they weren't going to stop until they had destroyed everything I'd worked for. That thought was what pushed me forward. I had to act. I couldn't just sit back and let them win. No one was going to take Maisie from me, not Jared, not Laurel, not anyone. But to get there, I needed a plan. I didn't go to Jared, not yet. He was too far gone, too wrapped up in his sister's web of lies. No, I needed to take this to the right people. People who could see through the smoke and mirrors. That's when I called Clara Benson, a family lawyer who came highly recommended. Her reputation for handling high-conflict cases was exactly what I needed. When I met Clara at her office, I was raw. I didn't try to hide the emotion. I didn't need to. She didn't flinch when I told her everything, about the accusations, about Jared's complicity, about the betrayal I had endured. And when I showed her the footage, her face turned serious. "Karen," she said, after watching the video in silence, "you're sitting on a gold mine. This isn't just family drama. This is a legal war." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Clara leaned forward, her eyes hard with determination. "What they've done to you, it's not just a betrayal. It's a calculated attempt to destroy you. This isn't just about family. This is about control, manipulation, and exploitation." I felt the cold burn of anger shoot through me. The walls around me, the ones I had been living in for years, began to crack. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. What had been happening to me had a name. And now, with Clara's help, I was going to take back my life. Clara didn't waste any time. She set up a meeting with Detective Haynes and arranged for a second interview with Noah. This time, a child psychologist would be present. I wasn't sure what would happen, but I had a gut feeling. Kids are impulsive, sure, but they can also be incredibly honest when pushed in the right direction. I was right. Noah cracked. The weight of the lies he'd been forced to carry was too much for him. Under the pressure, he confessed that Laurel had hit him, told him to lie, and promised him that Aunt Karen will go away for a while, but you'll be okay. He even mentioned Uncle Jared saying that Mommy will help make everything quiet again. It was everything I needed. When I got the call from CPS that evening, I felt like I was floating. Karen, Detective Haynes said, her voice tight, I need you to sit down. We've reviewed the footage, and we've heard Noah's statement. This isn't just a family dispute. This is a criminal case. We're moving forward with charges against Laurel. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to feel a shred of hope, but it didn't last long. The next morning, Jake, one of Jared's coworkers, called me out of nowhere. He was an acquaintance at best, but the urgency in his voice told me this wasn't casual. Karen, Jake said, sounding nervous, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Jared's been talking about leaving town. He said things were getting messy, and he had to be strategic. I don't know what that means, but he's been acting like you're the enemy. My stomach dropped. It was happening. Jared was planning to run. He was going to take Maisie. I had no idea where he would go, but I couldn't afford to sit around and wait. I called Clara immediately. She didn't waste a beat. By the time I hung up with Jake, Clara had already filed for emergency custody and a temporary restraining order. I had been through too much. I wasn't going to let Jared disappear with Maisie, not now, not ever. The next morning, we were at the courthouse before Jared even had a chance to pack his bags. When he walked into the house, bags packed and Maisie's little pink backpack slung over his shoulder, he froze. 2 officers stood in the hallway, waiting for him. His face paled as he realized what was happening. What is this? He stammered, his voice shaky. I stood behind the officers, calm and unshakable. You were going to take her, I said, my voice flat. You were going to disappear with her. Jared's face twisted into that wounded, performative look I'd come to recognize. You did this to us, he snapped, his voice low. No, I said coldly, you did this to me. One of the officers stepped forward. Mr. Maddox, you're under investigation for making false reports to CPS and conspiring to commit custodial interference. We're going to need you to come with us for questioning. He didn't resist. He just stood there, pale and silent. As they led him out of the house, I didn't feel a shred of remorse, not for him, not for the man who had helped destroy everything I'd built, not for the father of my daughter, who had chosen his sister's lies over his own wife. 2 days later, Laurel was arrested. The charges were serious child endangerment, coercion, and filing a false report with a government agency. I stood there, watching the news unfold on my phone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of justice. But it wasn't over. In the days that followed, I watched as my in-laws scrambled. Gail, my mother-in-law, tried to petition for temporary guardianship of Noah, claiming that Laurel was being unfairly targeted and that I was just a vindictive manipulator. The courtroom drama was more surreal than anything I'd imagined. She stood there, facing the judge, swearing that the footage I had provided was doctored, that I had somehow faked it. The judge didn't even flinch. The footage has been reviewed and authenticated by both CPS and law enforcement, she said, her voice cold and final. Your statement contradicts the evidence and the testimony of the child. This petition is denied. Gail left the courtroom in tears, and Laurel well. Laurel was facing 2 to 3 years in prison. The house felt hollow in the days after the ruling. I packed slowly, carefully, each box sealed with finality. I wasn't just packing up my things, I was packing up a life I'd once believed in. Maisie and I were leaving. It wasn't just about escaping the lies, it was about reclaiming our future, one step at a time. I filed a civil suit against both Jared and Laurel for emotional distress, defamation, and damages. The footage, the CPS reports, and Noah's statements made the case airtight. Laurel pled guilty to the charges, and Jared tried to settle privately, but I refused. I wanted the world to know the truth. The court ruled in my favor. The settlement was substantial enough to rebuild. To start fresh, Maisie and I left Utah behind and moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, where life was quieter. The circles under Maisie's eyes faded. She started sleeping through the night again. She laughed more. She painted again. As for me, I still wake up sometimes, my heart pounding, thinking I hear Laurel's voice or that someone's at the door with another lie, but then I remember Detective Haynes's voice, steady and certain. You need to see the rest of this clip. That clip saved my life. Story 3. My name is Celia Wren. I'm 28 years old and 4 months pregnant. Until recently, I thought that my family, despite their flaws, would always have my back. I was wrong, dead wrong. It feels surreal to say out loud, but my sister Maisie pushed me down the stairs to prove that I was faking my pregnancy. And the worst part? My parents are defending her. They're threatening to disown me if I press charges. No matter how hurt or angry you get, you don't just try to kill your sister. But here we are. If you're wondering what kind of family turns on their own pregnant daughter after something like this, just wait, because what happened after the fall was worse than the fall itself. This isn't a story about sibling rivalry. It's about betrayal, silence, and the breaking point where loving your family becomes a threat to your survival. For most of my adult life, I've been the responsible one, the calm sister, the peacemaker. I wore that title like armor, especially after the miscarriages, Julian, my husband, and I'd been trying to conceive for nearly 2 years. Our first loss was quiet, a heartbreak that we endured with forced smiles. The second nearly broke us. That one came with a nursery plan, a name picked out, and dreams that I couldn't bury. When I saw those 2 pink lines 4 months ago, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. This baby felt like a miracle, something I had been waiting for, desperately. I wasn't going to risk anything. Not even a family celebration could jeopardize this. Not again. So, we kept the pregnancy a secret, just until the first trimester passed, just until I felt safe. The risk was too high, and I wasn't going to take chances. Maisie, my younger sister, had her own form of loss. She was supposed to get married last fall. The dress was ordered, the venue paid for, the invitation sent until her fiancé cheated on her the night before their wedding. He didn't even have the decency to show up and explain himself. He just sent a friend to call it off. It devastated her. And my parents, my ever-disappointed parents, were mortified. Maisie was humiliated. Since then, she poured herself into her job, seeking promotions, working late, and racking up achievements that were supposed to prove she was still worthy of admiration. I admired her too, even if I never said it aloud, but I didn't want my pregnancy to take that away from her. Not this time. So, when my mom called to tell me Maisie was throwing a party to celebrate her latest promotion, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to support her, but because I didn't want to ruin her moment. The bump was starting to show, and I knew it. I was beginning to feel the changes in my body, but I figured with a clever dress, some careful layering, and sheer determination, I could keep it hidden just for one more night. Julian and I arrived at the party, and I was doing my best to keep my growing bump under wraps. I wore a long flowing navy dress with soft pleats and a high waistline. I even added shapewear to smooth out the edges. It was hot, uncomfortable, suffocating, but it hid the bump. That's all that mattered. Julian met me there straight from work, looking calm and grounded, like nothing could shake him. He kissed me on the cheek and quietly asked, "Still sure you want to do this?" I nodded. For Maisie. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. The music was upbeat, people were laughing, and Maisie looked radiant in a bold red jumpsuit. She was glowing with pride, and seeing her smile made me feel like maybe I had made the right choice. No one seemed to notice the dress, or my body, or the fact that I was avoiding wine and soft cheese like the plague. I dodged questions with practiced ease. Even when my mom made a teasing comment about my fuller face, I just laughed it off and blamed stress eating. But the moment that changed everything came quietly. I was sitting alone for a minute, just resting on the couch in the den when Aunt Phoebe sat down beside me. She offered me a glass of white wine. I declined. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she gave me a strange look. Then, with an innocent tone, she asked, "You've got that glow. Celia, you're not pregnant, are you?" My heart dropped. I forced a laugh. "Of course not." But she reached over without asking, placing a warm hand over my belly. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I can feel it. You are—" I froze. In that moment, I felt like a child caught in a lie even though I had done nothing wrong. "Please don't say anything," I whispered. "It's Maisie's night. We weren't ready to tell anyone yet." Phoebe gave me a sympathetic smile. "I get it, I do, but your mom's been praying for this day for years. Everyone's here. Maybe this is exactly the right time." Before I could stop her, she stood up and walked into the backyard. My stomach twisted. I followed her as fast as I could, but it was too late. Phoebe clinked her glass with a spoon and raised her voice. "Everyone, I have the most beautiful news to share tonight. Celia is pregnant." The world slowed. There was a brief silence, and then cheers erupted. My mom gasped, her eyes welling with tears. My dad clapped me on the back. Relatives swarmed around me. People I barely knew hugged me like I was a returning war hero. I didn't see Maisie right away, but when I finally did, she was standing near the fire pit, frozen. Her wine glass was still in her hand, her smile thin, and her eyes didn't meet mine. I walked up to her. Maisie didn't even look at me. "Of course you didn't," she said, her voice sharp. "You never mean to do anything, but you always end up in the center, don't you?" Her words burned, and in that moment, I realized that the secret was no longer the threat. The resentment underneath it was. I spent the rest of the night trying to shrink into the background, but the damage had already been done. Every hug from every aunt, every cheer, each round of congratulations, it was all carving another notch of humiliation into Maisie's night. Even if I hadn't planned it, I was now the spotlight thief. Maisie barely spoke another word to me. Her smile vanished completely, and she kept her distance, surrounded by her friends, fueled by a steady stream of wine. Julian checked on me frequently, trying to buffer the awkwardness, but even he couldn't stop the shift in the air. There was tension, thick, sticky, and growing. Later that night, I needed to use the restroom. The guest bath was occupied, so I slipped upstairs to use the one in the master bedroom. When I came out, Maisie was there, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, her eyes cold. "You lied," she said flatly. I was exhausted, emotionally drained. I was tired, exhausted, really. Maisie laughed, sharp and cruel. "Right, because you're just so considerate." I tried to explain again. It wasn't my intention to overshadow her. Phoebe made the announcement without asking. I hadn't even told Mom yet. But Maisie wasn't listening. She was drunk, defensive, vibrating with bitterness. And then she said it. "Maybe this one will end like the others did." I froze. "The miscarriages," she added. "Maybe this one doesn't make it either." The words hit like a punch to the chest. I stepped back, stunned, one hand instinctively cradling my stomach. "How dare you?" I whispered. "How dare you?" "You take everything," she snapped. "You get the husband, the house, now a baby, and you couldn't let me have one damn night." "I never tried to take anything from you," I said, my voice shaking. "I was there for you after the wedding fell apart. I held your hand when you cried. I never once made your pain about me." Her expression twisted, but she didn't respond. I turned to walk past her, to get away, to breathe, but then I felt it a hard shove to the middle of my back. My body lurched forward, arms flailing. My foot missed the first step. I grabbed for the railing, caught it for a split second, then my grip slipped. Everything happened fast and slow at the same time, twisted mid-air, trying to protect my stomach. I hit the stairs hard, my back, elbows, then my wrists, which snapped under the weight of the fall. Pain tore through me. I screamed. The world blurred. Voices rose in a panic. Doors opened. Julian's footsteps pounded closer. I heard someone call my name. and then I passed out. I woke up to the sound of voices, faint at first, like they were coming from underwater. Then, the pain hit, a searing, intense throb in my wrists. I opened my eyes, the bright hospital lights above making my head spin. My body felt like it had been through a war, my muscles stiff and bruised, my skin raw, but the worst of it wasn't physical. It was the reality of what had just happened. I was in a hospital bed, my wrists were wrapped tightly in gauze and fiberglass, and Julian was sitting beside me, holding my hand. His face was weary, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. "Celia," he said softly, his voice breaking through the fog in my mind. "You're okay. You're going to be okay. The baby's fine." The baby. The second those words left his lips, I felt a weight lift from my chest. He's okay. I repeated it over and over in my mind. My baby was safe. The pain in my wrists was excruciating, but the relief that my child was still safe, still with me, kept me from breaking down. That was the one thing I could cling to, but then the memory hit me: the stairs, the fall, Maisie's face above me, unreadable, before everything went black. "She pushed me," I whispered, barely audible. Julian's expression tightened, his jaw clenching, but he didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me, his eyes full of something that I couldn't quite name: disbelief, fury, pain, maybe all three. "What happened?" "Julian," I asked, "how did it go so far?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I was so focused on making sure you were okay, but Maisie, she's in the waiting room. She hasn't said a word to me since I got here. It's like she's acting like nothing happened." My stomach churned. I thought back to the last conversation I had with her, the bitterness, the resentment, the way she had shoved me down the stairs as though she believed she had the right to do it. All of it hit me like a freight train, and for a split second, I felt like I was suffocating. "How could she do this to me?" I whispered, more to myself than to Julian. "I don't know." "Celia," he said, his voice breaking, "but we can't just let this go, not like this. You need to press charges." I hesitated. The thought of going up against my own family, especially Maisie, felt like too much, but then I thought about the baby, about my son, who had just as much right to grow up free of fear and violence as anyone else. I couldn't let him be exposed to this, not to Maisie's toxicity, not to my parents' silence. "I don't know if I can do that," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You have to," Julian said, his tone firm but gentle. "Not just for you, but for him. This isn't about revenge. Celia, this is about accountability. For her, for your family, for your future." A few hours later, the doctors came in to check on me, giving me a new set of painkillers and ensuring that my vitals were stable, but the weight of what had happened, of what was still unfolding, felt like a dark cloud hanging over me. When the nurse left, Julian turned to me, his expression unreadable. "We need to file the police report, Celia, now." I knew he was right. Every part of me wanted to scream, to pull the covers over my head and pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't do that. I had to face it. I had to face her. I nodded, slowly, then reached for my phone. I dialed the police, my hands shaking. But I didn't back down. I gave them the details of the fall, what happened, and how Maisie had been the one to push me down the stairs. Every word I spoke felt like a betrayal. But I had to do this. I couldn't let my family continue to operate like everything was fine when it wasn't. I wasn't sure what I expected when the officers arrived. I didn't expect Maisie to be the one sitting in the room. Her arms crossed, her face an unreadable mask. She looked like she hadn't slept, like she'd been running on fumes for days. But there was no apology in her eyes. There was no remorse. Only something else. Something dark. Something that told me she truly didn't understand what she had done. The officers had questions for both of us. They asked Maisie about the fall, about what had happened that night. Her response was flat. "I didn't mean to hurt her," she said, her voice small and defensive. "I just wanted to make her stop being so fake. She always acts like she's better than me, like everything is perfect. She always gets everything." My chest tightened. Her words were like daggers. I wasn't perfect, I wasn't pretending to be, but in her eyes, I had taken everything from her. The baby, Julian, the life she thought she deserved. I didn't think she was really pregnant, Maisie added, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought it was just another one of her emotional plays. She always makes things about her. The words stung. She thought I was faking my pregnancy. She thought I was just manipulating everyone around me. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. How had we gotten here? How had I let it get this far? After the police finished their questioning, Julian and I were left alone in my hospital room. I was still reeling from everything, but the silence between us was thick, suffocating. Julian didn't say anything for a long time. I could tell he was processing everything, just like I was. Then my phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was my mom. I didn't want to answer it, didn't want to hear what she had to say, but I knew I had to. I tapped the screen, and her voice came through, shaky and strained. "Celia, sweetheart," she said, almost pleading, "we've been so worried about you. You have to understand. Maisie was drunk. She was upset. She didn't mean to hurt you." I was silent for a moment, my heart pounding. Then, I asked, my voice calm but cold, "How could you defend her? After what she did?" She pushed me down the stairs. "Mom, do you understand that?" There was a long pause, and then, in a tone that made my skin crawl, my mom said, "She didn't mean it. She's been under so much stress. Celia, you know that we can't just throw her away over one mistake." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my throat tightened, and I fought to hold back the tears. "You would defend her over me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You would choose her over your own daughter?" Another long pause. "We just want you to forgive her, for all of us." I couldn't take it anymore. I ended the call, handing the phone to Julian. "She's been under so much pressure," Julian said softly, looking at me with a mixture of concern and frustration, "but you don't have to carry this burden alone. We need to press charges, Celia, for both of you." I took a deep breath and nodded. "You're right," I said quietly. "It's time." The next morning, I made the call to press charges. The officers arrived shortly after. Julian and I went through everything what had happened. The police report, Maisie's statements. It was surreal. Like I was watching someone else's life unfold. But as I sat there, with my broken wrists, with the weight of my family's disapproval on my shoulders, I knew I had done the right thing. Maisie was arrested later that evening, not dragged away in handcuffs but summoned, booked, and then released on bail, paid for by my parents. The next few days were a blur. My parents tried to contact Julian, sending him messages and leaving voicemails, pleading with him to convince me to drop the charges. She didn't mean it. My mom begged. She's been through so much. Celia, she was drunk, stressed out, she didn't know what she was doing. I ignored every message, every call. I couldn't do it. Not anymore. It's strange how quickly you can realize that the people you love most can also be the ones who hurt you the deepest. The pain in my wrists, the bruising on my body, those things would heal. But the wounds Maisie had inflicted went deeper. The betrayal, the selfishness, the complete disregard for me and my baby, it wasn't something I could simply walk away from. It was going to change everything. And there was no going back. I spent the next few days in a haze, wrapped in painkillers and ice packs, trying to ignore the flood of guilt and anger that filled the room every time my parents reached out. It wasn't that I didn't love them, but I had learned something I couldn't unlearn, that their love for me wasn't unconditional. It was conditional. They wanted peace. They wanted a family, a facade of normalcy, and to get it, they were willing to protect Maisie at all costs, even if it meant protecting her over me, even if it meant disregarding the fact that their daughter was pushed down a flight of stairs by their other daughter. Maisie's lawyer was already trying to spin a narrative she was under so much stress. She was drunk. It was just one mistake. But I knew better. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. and I wasn't going to let it go unchallenged. Weeks passed, and things only got worse. Julian and I tried to keep our heads down, but the pressure from my parents grew relentless. Every call, every text, every voicemail, it was the same. They wanted me to forgive Maisie, to move on, to pretend like it hadn't happened, like nothing had changed. I couldn't. I kept thinking about what my mother had said on the phone. She didn't mean it. She's been under so much stress. Celia. But what about me? What about the stress I had been under for months? Carrying this child, trying to keep everything together, all while watching my sister self-destruct. My parents didn't care about that. They didn't care about my pain. They only cared about Maisie's. It made me sick. It was Julian who finally snapped me out of the fog. You're not doing this for them, Celia. You're doing this for you, and for our son. He was right. I couldn't let this go, not anymore. The day of the court hearing was cold, a sharp chill hanging in the air like an omen. Julian and I arrived early, but as I stepped into the courthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being judged, not just by the people in the courtroom, but by my own family. Maisie's lawyer was already there, her posture rigid and sharp, like she was preparing for battle, and I knew she would fight hard. She had to. My parents had paid for her services. They were desperate to keep the truth from coming out, desperate to protect their precious Maisie. I felt a sickening wave of anger and betrayal, but it wasn't just about me, it was about my baby. This wasn't just some family drama anymore. This was about accountability, about ensuring that what happened to me never happened to anyone else. When Maisie finally walked into the courtroom, she looked different, like she had rehearsed this moment, like she had planned what she was going to say and how she was going to act. Her hair was perfect, her clothes crisp. She looked like she hadn't aged a day since the night she pushed me down the stairs, but there was something about her that was different. She was cold. Her eyes met mine briefly, but then they quickly darted away, as if she couldn't bear to look me in the face. I felt a sharp pang of something disappointment. Maybe, or maybe it was just pain. Pain that she never really saw me, not for who I was, not for what I had done for her. I had always been there for Maisie, always. When her fiancé left her, I was there. When she cried after the wedding disaster, I was the one who held her. But none of that seemed to matter. To her, I was just another obstacle, a rival, someone she resented for having the things she could never have. The trial wasn't long, but it felt like it stretched on for hours. Maisie's lawyer tried to paint a picture of an emotional breakdown, of a young woman pushed to the edge by the trauma of her failed engagement. They tried to claim that she was under duress, that she didn't understand the consequences of her actions. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what happened that night, and I wasn't about to let them manipulate the story. Not again. Julian sat beside me, his hand tight around mine, steady and calm as always. He didn't need to say anything. I could feel his support without a word. But it wasn't just about him. It was about standing up for myself, for my child. It was about ensuring that what Maisie did wasn't swept under the rug. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge spoke. Based on the evidence presented and the statements from both parties, the court has determined that the defendant, Maisie Wren, will be placed on probation for the next 6 months. She will also be required to attend mandatory counseling and to pay for the victim's medical expenses, which totaled $12,000. My heart didn't soar. It didn't even beat faster. It was cold, dead. Maisie's face twisted into something ugly, but she didn't say a word. I could hear the bitterness in her silence. She wasn't sorry, not for what she did, and certainly not for the pain she caused. After the verdict, there was no celebration, no relief. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was the weight of what I had lost. Not just in Maisie, but in my entire family. They had failed me. They had failed to see the truth. And now, it was too late to fix it. The calls from my parents didn't stop. They kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. They pleaded for me to forgive Maisie, for me to drop the charges. They told me how hard it had been for her, how difficult her life had become. But all I could think about was how hard my life had been. How hard it had been to watch Maisie spiral, to watch my family support her no matter what she did. It wasn't about forgiving her anymore. It was about protecting myself and my son. My mother finally called Julian one night, her voice breaking. "Please, Julian, you have to make her understand. This is tearing us apart." I heard him take a deep breath, the sound filling the silence. "Celia isn't the one tearing this family apart. You are." The words stung, but they were the truth. They had all chosen Maisie over me, and I couldn't live in that world anymore. I made the decision that night. I couldn't keep playing the role of the forgiving sister, the peacemaker, the one who swallowed her pain to keep the family together, because in the end, all that did was destroy me. So, I made the call. I shut the door on my family. Months passed before I heard from them again. No apology from Maisie, no effort to repair the damage she had caused. My parents tried a few more times to reach out, sending me guilt-laden messages. But I was done. Then, 5 days after my son was born, my mother showed up at my door, holding a bouquet of daisies, with my father behind her, clutching baby gifts. I stood there, my son in my arms, my heart steady and calm. "You shouldn't be here," I said, my voice firm. My mother's smile flickered. "Celia, come on, don't do this. This is your father, this is me. We deserve to meet our grandson." Julian stepped in front of me, his stance protective. "You lost that right the moment you stood with the person who nearly killed my wife and son." My mother's face fell. "Maisie is sick. She's been drinking. She's seeing a therapist. You can't punish us all forever." I looked her dead in the eye. "You defended her. You begged me not to press charges after she pushed me down a flight of stairs. You cared more about protecting her future than protecting my life." She sighed, her voice quiet. "We made a mistake." "No," I replied. "You made a choice." And with that, I closed the door on them, on the family who chose silence over accountability, on the family who chose comfort over truth. The hardest part wasn't losing Maisie. It wasn't even losing my parents. It was losing the version of myself who kept swallowing my pain to keep the peace. That woman is gone. In her place is a mother who knows this. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your loyalty, especially when it costs you your safety. You certainly don't owe forgiveness to someone who never asked for it. I didn't destroy my family, I uncovered it, and then I chose peace over blood. And I will never apologize for that.